perfect union makes most perfect sense in the land of the free. Oh, say, can you see? Then we will have justice and peace. Something is happening here. We all know the old road's a dead end. Over and over is over, and again will be never again. So many good people been beaten, shot down, but a new revolution is coming around. Out in the street, there's a crowd gathering. Something is happening here. We all know the old road's a dead end. Over and over is over, and again will be never again. We're demanding the dream is no longer deferred, that our nation of laws live up to its word. And we'll hammer out history till nothing's the same. Something is happening here. We all know the old road's a dead end. Over and over is over, and again will be never again. When in the course of human events, a more perfect union makes most perfect sense in the land of the free. Oh, say, can you see? Then we will have justice and peace. Something is happening here. We all know the old road's a dead end. Over and over is over, and again will be never again. Over and over is over, and again will be never again.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. That was a wonderful song by Anna Egge, who you will hear from later, a friend of Eric's. And on behalf of the Train Foundation, welcome to the annual Civil Courage Prize Award Ceremony. I'm George Biddle, and I have the privilege of co-chairing the Train Foundation and emceeing today's event. To start, I would like to thank our generous donors and patrons who make the Civil Courage Prize possible. Without your support, it would not be possible to have this prize every year. It's so vital, and we deeply appreciate it. Before I say a few words about Eric and the Civil Courage Prize, I wanted to let you know what our agenda is for the next hour. We've got a packed one, and I think you're really going to enjoy this session. Taryn Higashi is the Executive Director of Unbound Philanthropy and is the person who nominated Eric for the Civil Courage Prize. She will make introductory remarks. Then we're privileged to have Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation, who will formally introduce Eric. We will then go to Portland, where Eric lives, for the awards ceremony and Eric's address. After Eric's remarks, we will have a live Q&A with Eric. We encourage you all to post questions in the chat room at any time throughout today's session, and we'll get to them when we go live with Eric. Lastly, Eric will bring on Anna at the end to discuss her background and the importance of music to the social justice and anti-bigotry movement. And then we will conclude with the first live video performance of a song, Lie, 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 performed by Anna. This is both a sad and poignantly appropriate day to be honoring our courageous laureate, as the civil trial for the 2017 Charlottesville hate violence began just yesterday. Many of you may have been reading about it in the papers. The horrific events in Charlottesville woke some of us from our slumber and presented us with the harsh reality of what was happening across our country, to the point that the FBI has stated unequivocally that the greatest threat to our democracy are violent domestic extremists. Eric Ward was never in a slumber. He has spent his entire life advocating for an inclusive, multiracial democracy and fighting peacefully against bigotry, racism, and hate violence. Eric is clear-eyed, but not combative, following in the footsteps of Martin Luther King and John Lewis. He brings light, dialogue, and constructive engagement. And ironically, he comes from a punk music rock background. We are honored to award this year's Civil Courage Prize to Eric, a brave American and the first American to ever receive the Civil Courage Prize. Eric epitomizes what the prize stands for. I realize many of you have been with us before at this ceremony or at other events we've held, but there are also many of you who have not. So I wanted to share some of the history of the Civil Courage Prize before we move to the rest of our agenda. The prize was inspired by the great Soviet dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn and grew out of our chairman John Train's friendship with and admiration for Solzhenitsyn. To John, Solzhenitsyn exemplified civil courage. Solzhenitsyn single-handedly stood up to the totalitarian Soviet regime at great personal risk. His valor was not on the battlefield, but inside of a brutal repressive society where he was the sole valiant actor. To honor Solzhenitsyn and others who would follow his path, John established the Civil Courage Prize and endowed it through the Train Foundation. The prize has been given annually for the past 21 years to an individual who demonstrates steadfast resistance to evil at great personal risk. John had an extraordinary vision for this prize, and today we have an extraordinary laureate, Eric Ward. I will now turn to Taryn Higashi.
Greetings. It is my great honor to join you in celebrating this year's Civil Courage Prize laureate, Eric K. Ward. I've been invited to say a few words about Eric and why I nominated him. Then Darren Walker will introduce him. I nominated Eric, the first U.S. recipient of this prize, for many reasons. First and foremost, because Eric is a brave, prophetic, and brilliant leader who is a match for the precarious moment that American democracy finds itself in right now. A moment when we're witnessing the fragility of the U.S. political system, the rising tide of white nationalism, and the threat of authoritarianism, dangers that Eric has warned us of for many years. Second, because Eric not only speaks out powerfully against these forces, but also speaks directly to all of us who are yearning for a just, inclusive, multiracial democracy. He insists that we can be agents of change, and he urges us to consider how we will answer the question of future generations. What did you do when your most cherished values and your system of government were under profound attack? Third, because Eric shows us a way forward. He's working to forge a new center, one that has room for a wide swath of Americans united in opposition to white nationalism and authoritarianism. And Eric understands that one of the ways to forge that new center is through culture. A musician and a songwriter, Eric writes songs that he uses to bridge political and social divisions in America. He is an advocate for using popular culture to help us imagine a country where we are continually moving toward our highest ideals. And finally, I nominated Eric because Eric gives me hope, a hope that is grounded in the pragmatism and wisdom of his learned and lived experience. He writes, "Democracy is on the march in America. Democracy is getting it done in the streets every day. The left has significantly shifted where the fulcrum sits in the balancing act of the United States. Now it's time to build a new center, to take ourselves seriously around inclusion, to act, as Angela Davis said, as if it were possible to radically transform the world, to act as if we already have. We honor Eric with this distinguished award and by how we live, by his example."
I am so happy to be with you to recognize my inimitable, remarkable friend, Eric Ward, on the occasion of his receiving the Civil Courage Prize. The word courage embodies Eric Ward's life. He has spent a lifetime committed to the idea that every person deserves to live with dignity, with honor, and with justice. Eric has been, for me, through our working together, most recently at the Ford Foundation, a role model of the idea of a different kind of philanthropy. In the words of what Dr. Martin Luther King said about philanthropy, philanthropy is commendable, but it should not allow the philanthropist to overlook the economic injustice which makes philanthropy necessary. And in this regard, Eric has reminded us, as Dr. King reminded us, that philanthropy cannot be only about generosity and charity. It must also be about dignity and justice. Eric has been on the front lines fighting racism, anti-Semitism, ableism, the kinds of scourges that have marginalized too many of us for too long. This nation is a better nation because of the work of Eric Ward. But Eric is the first to remind us that the journey is long and that the road ahead will not be easy to traverse. There are forces at play that seek to ensure that not everyone participate. And in those occasions, those moments when I feel depressed, dejected, demoralized, I am reminded that there are people like Eric Ward whose character, integrity, commitment, grit, intelligence will ensure that this country lives up to its ideals. We need Eric and many others like him to hold the mirror up to America and say, look at yourself. Thank you, Eric Ward, for holding the mirror up to this country, to all of us, and demanding that we do our very best to deliver justice for all. Thank you.
I want to thank Darren and Taryn for those important and vital opening remarks that set the stage for moving to the awards ceremony and to actually hearing from Eric directly. So with that, we'll go to Portland and the ceremony where Eric received the prize.
I am Ariadne Calvo-Platero, and as President and Trustee of the Civil Courage Prize, I'm here on behalf of our founder, John Train, and my fellow trustees. While due to the pandemic, we were not able to have the Civil Courage Prize ceremony in person in New York City, we are honored to be here in Portland at the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education. I would like to thank Judy Margles, the museum's executive director, for hosting us. The museum's history and mission states that it challenges its visitors to resist indifference and discrimination and to envision a just and inclusive world. This is a fitting description for this year's Civil Courage Prize laureate, an expert on the relationship between authoritarian movements, hate violence, and preserving inclusive democracy. While his nominator and others give more detailed introductions, I would like to say how pleased we are to award the 2021 Civil Courage Prize to our first ever American laureate, Eric Ward. We honor Eric for his lifetime commitment to resisting evil and injustice at great personal risk and his tireless work as an anti-racist activist. Eric, please allow me to give you the Civil Courage Prize Medal for 2021. The podium is yours.
Thank you. Mr. John Train, members of the Board of Trustees of the Train Foundation, distinguished guests, and to all gathered today, I'm deeply honored to join the esteemed lineage of the Civil Courage Prize recipients, from 2019 laureate Gonzalo Himiob Santome to the founding patron Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I'm humbled to join the company of 24 visionary leaders from around the globe. 4 decades ago, when I was a punk rock kid living in poverty and surviving racism in Southern California, if someone had told me I would one day be the recipient of such an honor, I simply could not have imagined it. At that point in my life, I wasn't sure I'd even live to see my late 20s. But today, here we are. And I still can't help but be reminded of an earlier moment. The day I decided I wasn't going to run from bigotry. That day, in 1979, I was attacked in a hate crime while I waited for the bus from school. It wasn't my first time being threatened, but it was the first day I decided not to run. There's no bravado here, nor was there in that moment. It meant I took a beating, but I didn't care. I just knew I had to not run. It is those exact moments that connect each of us to the lineage of all those who struggle against bigoted violence. I'm not the first or last human who has or will learn this lesson. I knew as they knew that if I didn't proclaim my right to exist, I would forever surrender that right. Like the emerging movements I represent today, I rest on the shoulders of generations who resisted tyranny within the United States, the indigenous, the enslaved, the oppressed, and their allies, those who fought and in many cases were murdered because of their thirst for a fully inclusive American democracy, one where everyone can live, love, worship, and work free from bigotry and hate. Those names are much too numerous to speak out loud here today, but my remarks can't commence without first naming the late Congressman John Lewis, forever the United States patron saint of civil courage. May his name forever evoke the lifted spirits and the martyrs of America's great civil rights struggles, past, present, and future. Has the United States defended itself against a crushing wave of authoritarianism and bigoted violence? We have much to learn from those who came before us, not only about their tenacity and the tenacity needed to carry forward the great enterprise of a just society, but the courage needed to resist all that imperils the gains of America's civil rights movement and the strengthening American democracy that follows in its wake. The next stage of resistance to growing authoritarianism in the United States, we must transform this nascent anti-bigotry field into its own burgeoning social movement, a movement that centers democracy, belonging, and opportunity, a social movement that consciously seeks to avoid becoming that which we critique, one brave enough to heed the great sages Audre Lorde's warning, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. White supremacy can be seen as the master's house, and white nationalism, its political movement seeking to renovate that house through a campaign of ethnic cleansing. But inclusive democracy in America is not the master's house. It is the people's house, a space of radical inclusion built through relentless labors and blood of Black and Indigenous communities, and those who have joined in this intergenerational moral campaign for human dignity and fairness. I speak today with great humility. It's because I know we have approached a moment in the United States where the words of my immediate Civil Courage Prize predecessor are now my own. I do not recognize my country. I cannot believe how low we have fallen. When we look at the dismantling of democratic and economic and humanitarian institutions in Venezuela, the rule of law, independent judiciary, free press, free speech, freedom to organize, independent elections, and the freedom to vote, it no longer sounds like the troubles of a far-off land. It looks very much like the footprint of the authoritarian insurgency we face here. We in the United States, working to resist authoritarianism in our own country, become stronger, more effective, more courageous when we attend to the example set by every other Civil Courage Prize laureate. Here in our own country, we are blessed to have many who epitomize courage. not the might is right American bravado and exceptionalism that portrays the maturity of our nation. I'm speaking of those who dare to believe in the radical notion that democracy is not a state, it is an act, as the patron saint John Lewis reminded us in his last public words. Lewis believed the ordinary people with extraordinary vision, me, you, we, could redeem the soul of America by getting in good trouble, necessary trouble. The Allens, the Sandras, the Lukes, the Sarahs, the Shawns, the Lyns, the Melissas, the Pauls, and all those who resist the shadows of fear. These are the people in whose name I accept this award. Ordinary people, our backs to the wall. We won't run and we won't hide. I wish we had time to tell these stories. Some names you might know, like Heather Heyer, killed 4 years ago in Charlottesville by a 20-year-old who admired Hitler. The story of over 140 Capitol police officers injured by pro-Trump rioters during the January insurrection. I stand here today as a grateful representative of the thousands of people throughout the United States who were killed or sacrificed their lives to resist bigoted violence and authoritarianism. I also remember today that this list doesn't begin in 2017. The story begins in 1979, a massacre in Greensboro, North Carolina, where members of the Ku Klux Klan and the American Nazi Party shot and killed 5 anti-Klan protesters. The list includes my adopted state of Oregon, where Ethiopian student Mulugeta Sarah was lynched by neo-Nazi skinheads in 1988, and Hattie Mae Cohens and Brian Mark, who suffered the same fate in 1992. These are but a few of the names taken by hate violence and political violence during my lifetime. They join the honor roll of all of those killed during the civil rights movement of the mid-20th century and during the brutal eras of Jim Crow, forced labor, chattel slavery, native genocide, and the political violence of this century. I also reflect the stories of countless and mostly unrecognized resistors, rescuers, allies, and accomplices, the ordinary people and communities in every corner of the country who have come together under difficult circumstances in order to say, in a world full of darkness, I won't turn off my light. I have the privilege of working with such people every day at the organization I lead, Western State Center, and with the musicians and culture makers, the community leaders, and local elected officials, and other civil society organizations with whom we work. This award recognizes all of them and gives us another opportunity here in the US to be part of a global movement for human dignity. The awarding of this prize to a US recipient is an important message to the world. America's emerging anti-bigotry movement needs you. As the first American recipient, I know we can't defend democracy in America. We can't preserve and expand the civil rights won by earlier generations, or work on behalf of human rights and planetary survival without the help of the global community. To democratic governments, civil society leaders, journalists, artists, and thinkers around the world, in this moment, I know it would be easy for one to think we in America are getting what we deserve. But we are a country that is also made up of your descendants, of your own family members who have come here as immigrants and refugees. Please don't let the understandable wariness of American exceptionalism cloud a simple truth. The health of democracy in the United States has very real consequences for the health of the world. I ask that in the coming years, that you remember that the America John Lewis aspired to is still being born. To my fellow Americans, having the Civil Courage Prize bestowed to an American for the first time in its 25-year history is both an affirmation of those fighting to preserve and expand our inclusive democracy and a red flag of how much is at risk. it is time for us to admit we don't have all the answers. We can't curb the rise of authoritarianism on our own, but we can learn from immigrants and refugees who are joining our communities each and every day, as well as all those people struggling to build or sustain inclusive democracy in countries and societies around the world. I look forward to the many conversations and learnings on this topic over the next year. But for today, I think I've spoken long enough. Once again, I thank the Train Foundation for lifting up resistance to authoritarian violence and othering, and to all the previous laureates for their example to the world. I pledge to try to live up to the bar of courage you have collectively set. To the artist who keeps souls fed and spirits lifted, you prove that music is breath, the breath that helps to nurture the vision of inclusive democracy during its hardest moments. To my partner, Jessica, and the staff of Western State Center, our tireless senior fellows, board members, and our national leadership network. Most will never know how deep your courage and commitment is in this moment. You helped galvanize a democracy to defend itself. You are forever my definition of bravery. So, my dear friends and colleagues, this moment is for all of us in the United States and around the world who choose to say, in the words of UB40, a band who provided the quintessential soundtrack to my earliest years of courage, I won't close my eyes when the future don't look bright. Though the road seems too long, in a world full of darkness, I won't turn off my light. Let us each continue to light the way forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. That's really wonderful. Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Eric, for those inspiring remarks, and congratulations. That is, we are just so thrilled that you can be with us today. It has been my great privilege to get to know you over these past few weeks, and your winning this prize is an important moment for our efforts at the Civil Courage Prize and for the efforts of so many Americans like yourself across the country. So thank you. We're thrilled to have you with us. And I do encourage our guests online to post as many questions as you'd like. We'll try and get to them over the next half hour or so. But I will take the privilege or the prerogative of the chair and to ask the first question of our speaker and our laureate. And as a fellow UB40 devotee, I think I'll start with the lyrics that you quoted at the end of your speech. And you said that the future doesn't look so bright. And I was wondering what your thoughts on where do we go from here? How do we mobilize an inclusive anti-bigotry, anti-hate movement in our country? And how do we inspire civil courage in today's world?
Thank you. And once again, thank you to the Train Foundation, John Train, all the trustees, Taryn Higashi, for lifting up an incredible sector. Longer than I in this country, there have been generations who have come together to speak out and to organize against bigotry. Now, I think it's important to understand these groupings typically are quite diverse. We often say we may not agree on anything else except that political violence and hate violence, discrimination aren't the answers to the complex problems we're facing in this society. We also understand at this very heavy moment, right? UB40, other reggae artists would use the term heavy manners. That's the moment we find ourselves in. Deep anxiety, malaise, horror shows, right? This idea that we can beat one another into submission, right? That we can dominate. These are individuals who understand this is not the way forward, that we have struggled for generations to build a democracy, one that is people-centered, transparent, accountable. That's inclusion. That's what moves us forward together. Look, we have very hard days ahead of us. I am optimistic that we are winning, but with every win comes a great backlash. And that is what we are witnessing each and every day. We are watching it, whether you're immigrants and refugees, or whether you're health workers, or whether you are a school board member. You are facing this backlash. We can face this fear together. I learned this from the Father Bill Wasmuth, who was a Catholic priest in Northern Ireland, who had his home blown up by the Aryan nations while he was inside of it. And I watched Father Bill Wasmuth for decades do the hard work of building community. And you build community ultimately by getting to know your neighbors, not trying to convert them to an ideology, but trying to understand what values we have in common. Kindness, the desire for safety, opportunity. We spend too much time turning political ideologies almost into a form of worship. They aren't scripture. They're guides that are supposed to help us understand our values, not teach us our values. So what I say to individuals is to find one another right now, not about Republican or Democrat, not about conservative or liberal, but this is ultimately a conversation versus around inclusion versus exclusion. And most Americans desire inclusion. We know it creates more vibrant communities, more healthy, safe communities, and more prosperous communities. So what I can tell people right now is to find those neighbors in your community. Start with the conversations. Be proud of your values, right? Values that bring us together as Americans. But also the last thing I will say is that it's important for us to understand that our world is interconnected. Here in our country, we are made up of generations of individuals who come from other places. We're also made up of generations of people who have been here since time immemorial, right? We can move forward together. Jazz, punk rock, other forms of art, sports have shown us that we have the ability to see each other's humanity. We simply have to choose to, and we have to defend the right to be able to do so.
I think those words should be heard by everybody who's not with us today, but across this country, because you're so right. Inclusiveness is the key to this, and how we go about it and how we get people to accept that. We have a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. One comes from, I need to scroll to the question, excuse me for 1 second. It's from Andy Potter, and he says, what's your next project, Eric? What are you going to be doing next to fight? Let me get it exactly correct, because I couldn't scroll up to it. What is your next project in your work to fight bigotry?
We think the work to fight against bigotry means first, not allowing the dreams of everyday Americans, a diverse set of Americans, to die. We have come through a very hard period in this country, a period of political violence, a pandemic that has stolen lives. So for instance, we know likely somewhere around 1 in every 350 African Americans in this country has now perished from COVID-19, right, in less than 2 years. And I'll say that a significant 1 in 350 African Americans. This country has been devastated by the pandemic, by the economic instability that came with it, and the anxiety. The next project is simply this. The next project is to be courageous enough to begin speaking to conservatives who aren't interested in setting the house ablaze, right? Speaking to folks on the left who are not interested in setting the house ablaze. Those who understand that we have struggled very hard for this country. We have wrestled with one another, and the pain and the injuries and the death has been significant. It's time to stop. Those battles are over. The battle is the battle for the next generations, those who are just being born. What type of country do we want to leave with them? One that descends into violent political chaos, or one that is built off the dreams and opportunities of what can be? There is no reason anyone in this country needs to go to bed at night wondering if they can make their mortgage or rent. There is no reason fathers and mothers have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to be able to live in their communities and raise their children. We don't have to suffer like that. We can choose different paths, but to choose different paths means moving forward together. And that means understanding each other's humanity. So I'll be focusing on those hard, complicated relationships that I believe are necessary, as complicated, as hard as they are, to finding the way forward. The other piece that I'll continue to do is to stand up for the most marginalized, the most vulnerable in our society, in each context, in each situation. I don't care the color of their skin. I don't care their religion. I don't care their sexual orientation or their class background or their ethnicity or nationality. What I care about is that they know that they have the right to exist in this United States of America, that this United States of America focuses and emphasizes on the idea of united. That's the next project. And I'm not alone in that. Every day, I see thousands of leaders across this country in organizations, grassroots, government, law enforcement, business, religious leaders who are picking up that call. I think one of the things I've learned in this moment over the last 4 years is that this nascent anti-bigotry field has evolved into a national movement, right? A national movement that needs some of us to take a step to the side. Our job moving forward, right, is not to lead this movement, but to nurture it and to inspire it. And that's what I'm looking forward to doing next.
Thank you for that. And as I take away, again, another critical word, engagement at all times with such a wide array of our society. The next question comes from an advisor to the Civil Courage Prize and the former British ambassador to the United Nations, Sir Jeremy Greenstock. And he says, that's a magnificent acceptance speech, Eric. Can I ask you why you think so many Americans appear to follow the leaders of bigotry and untruth when the example set by early Americans for inclusive democracy is such a clear one?
It's hard. People are finding out more and more each day, particularly those who are having to bury their loved ones from COVID-19, right? Those who are losing their homes and losing their jobs. Right, we've learned that we're being manipulated. That there's no neutrality in dividing Americans. There is actually a value for some, and the value is exploitation, right? Exploitation of our dreams, exploitation of opportunity. This idea that somehow we're in a scarcity battle with one another, right? While wealth inequality grows larger and larger each day. At the end of the day, it's misinformation. But here's the thing. Americans don't like to be taken advantage of. And more Americans are realizing that all of us are being taken advantage of. We're being turned against one another off of these false notions that somehow demographic anxiety, right? This idea things are changing in the United States in terms of race, religion, not in the ways we've been told, but these things are happening and they do build anxiety. But anxiety is natural. Look, the first time I took a dive off a stage into a crowd during a punk rock show, I got to tell you, I had lots of anxiety. I didn't know if that crowd would catch me, right? If they would hold me, if my community would be there. And in those kinds of moments, there are those who will seek to take advantage of us. But look, we have to jump that stage anyway. We have to trust this crowd is going to catch us, because it's important that we begin to trust one another. So look, I think at the end of the day, we have to do a better job of showing people this inclusive democracy and what it looks like. People have to understand what it feels like. If they can't imagine the future, right, in a future that is grounded in inclusion, They will still choose exclusion and violence because it's what they know. And in scary times, people will pick what they know, even if it's not healthy, even if it's dangerous, even if it descends into a spiral of violence. And so the onus is on us to make real the future, but we have to make that future real in real time. People have to be able to touch it, smell it. And that's not in meetings where they're being told, right, that their role is to be quiet, right? It's not a space, right, where we practice the same domination techniques that we have been taught by the system of white supremacy. It has to love, right? It has to feel. It has to show everyone that they have a place at this table, that this is the table that brings us fully into the 21st century. It's not as scary as we think. And you know what? The first time I took a dive off a stage, I think it was at a Bad Brain show. You know what? The crowd caught me. And I'm here to tell everyone, including white folks, right? This country will catch you, right? You can jump the stage. It's something very beautiful. And we can all do it. We're very brave in this country. We're very courageous people. But sometimes we've forgotten it. And there have been those who have been trying to help us keep forgetting.
That is a truly fantastic image of jumping off the stage and having humanity catch you in many ways. That's who's catching you in that moment. And it's a great image for all of us to hold with us as we think about the risks that we need to take as we go forward and get behind some of the efforts that you're so eloquently describing today. I have to ask you a question because it speaks directly to the Civil Courage Prize in particular. And you're very humble and you don't often bring this up. But how did you decide to directly encounter and engage white nationalists? How did you do it? And how scared were you as you began those efforts? Because you talk about encounter and engagement, and you've done it personally in a way that I think many people find it hard to imagine how you could have. And so I want to ask you that.
Yeah. I mean, it came through evolution. Look, there are a lot of mistakes and a lot of errors I made coming up that I would do differently if I could. I came up in an age where neo-Nazis were directly physically attacking us in shows, attacking our friends, threatening us. And there was no one who was coming to our aid. We hear these stories of the Gen X period, right, of the invisible parents, but it was really, we were a generation that really was adrift on our own. And in those shows, right, security guards didn't come to help us, right, bouncers didn't help us, the club owners. And if the police were there to beat up all of us, right, harass all of us as we were leaving these shows. And so we were left to our own defenses, and we were young. And so what we knew how to do was to fight. So we fought back with our fists. We didn't understand that we were setting off a cycle of violence that would continue to evolve. You know, it was honestly older individuals. I can name, some of those names: Loretta Ross's, right, Ken Stearns, Leonard Zeskins, Marion Malcolm's, Bahati Ansari's, Guadalupe Quinn's, right, Nadia Telsey's. The names really can go on. Who began to kind of model different forms of engagement. They told us we didn't have, as Laudrey Lorde said, as I quoted earlier, we don't have to use the master's tools to confront this. At the end of the day, right, that we could begin to build the spaces, right, and defend the spaces and society we say we wanted, right, by coming together. That at the end of the day, if we wanted to know the danger of the white nationalist movement, we had to be willing to pick up the mirror and to take a deep look into it. Now, look, I'm not saying, right, that we ignore white nationalism. What I'm saying is that if white nationalism has the oxygen it has in our society, it's because we haven't put forth a valid alternative to white nationalism. The current status quo is not that. No one wants it, right? Very few people want it. It's not working because it's not equitable and it doesn't bring hope for the future. So what I think that I learned mostly was that you lean in. Simon Greer, a great colleague of mine, says, you know, you lean in and you listen with curiosity. And that's what I've been able to do. I've had the privilege to be able to do that for decades. But it's been very powerful. And I know this is a long answer, but I was talking about this yesterday. What allows me to engage is the belief that has long existed within the Black community, within the civil rights movement, right? Everyone is redeemable. That's what it means to redeem the soul of America. I'm not out to convert people, again, to my ideology or to my worldview. I'm a progressive, right? People point to me and say, Eric's left. Well, that's very true. But my job is not to make this country a left country. My job is to make this a country where everyone feels that they are home and have a future, right? It's my job to bring my perspective, right? Not to force my perspective on the rest of the world, and to trust in people. At the end of the day, my belief is in people and not in power. I understand the importance of building power, but I didn't come into this work to build power. I came into this work ultimately because I wanted to kick it with my friends and listen to music and not be harassed. And at the end of the day, that's just what I want to do. And that's what most people want to do. They want to be with their families. They want to be with their friends. They want to enjoy this life that has been given to us. Look, many people can debate whether what happens after we leave this planet. But here's one thing that is undebatable. All of us will leave this planet, right? And since we know that, one of the things we can do is to try to make it as magical as possible until we leave the planet. That's our work in front of us. That's not political. We can build politics around it, but I just call that human kindness. That's what it means to be human. And when we approach people in that way, look, we sometimes will have to pay the price of those who cannot reflect that back to us. But at the end of the day, it has built the strongest democracy that America has ever had. 75 years of Black and Indigenous struggle have brought us to this point. And the thing we have to make sure we don't do, right, is to become the monsters that we seek to confront. We have to bring the dreams, and we have to show people that we love this country more than anyone else because we know what it can be, what we can aspire to be as Americans. That's what I think it means to engage in this morning. That's what it means to be courageous, to lean in, to complicate things, nuance.
I love your kind of foundational belief in human kindness. I think it's something that some of us always don't think about enough in our daily lives. And you are humble about the courage and the bravery it took for you to do what you've done for the last 30 years of your life. And I just think we need to acknowledge that because of the prize that you've won today. We have time for one last question, and then we're going to ask Anna to join us. This is a question that comes from Darren Sando. He says, congratulations, Eric. After your wonderful award ceremony, I'm heading out to vote against a school board candidate who is heralding critical race theory as a destructive force to our children here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She is backed by dark money and is dividing our neighborhood. How do we heal our community during these times and reach out to those neighbors? You've talked a lot about this. If you can just give us a short sort of thought of, in a community in Albuquerque, what could Darren do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to first, thank you for voting, and thank you for voting your values. I think that is the most important thing. And Darren, I hope you take 5 neighbors with you. But the second piece I think to understand is here's a moment, right, where a neighborhood is being manipulated, right? It's being manipulated by this word critical race theory that is, most of us don't understand. It's a legal theory, right? And it's meant to make us nervous, right? What's going on. But the truth is what's really being debated is, can we talk honestly about history, right? Can we talk about it and understand talking about where we have come from is not an attempt, right, to undercut where we're trying to go. It's merely an attempt to share stories. We share stories each and every day. I've sat with white nationalists and shared stories. I've sat with truck drivers in southern parts of the world and shared stories, right? I've shared stories with people who are my opposite and folks who I adore and think of as twins, right? What we have to begin to do is to share stories. And it has become a courageous act in this country to share stories. But part of our stories is history. And so what I would tell people to do is to vote your values. I would say to help your neighbors vote your values. But the most courageous thing you can do right now is to tell stories. Storytelling is one of the most powerful forms of resistance that we still have. And if they are attempting, right, to close down public spaces like schools, we need to take those stories to the public square and proclaim those stories out loud. That is what it looks like to resist courageously in this moment. They can't stop the stories that have occurred in this country.
That is great advice, and thank you for that again, Eric. And now it's time to bring Anna on to join us. Music has been a cornerstone of your efforts, Eric, and I think it would be interesting for you to and Anna to have a conversation for 5 minutes about her background, the importance of music to you. And then we all have the privilege of hearing Anna's song as we wrap up at 1:30. So I'm going to turn it to you to engage Anna for a few minutes, Eric.
Yeah. Anna, how are you?
Hi, Eric. Congratulations. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. You know, folks probably don't know, you and I are very introverted, and folks would say, what? But we are, but it's so wonderful to see you. And congratulations to you as well. I learned yesterday, and I know I'm not supposed to make a big deal of it, but you are under consideration by the Grammys for American Roots Song and American Roots Performance. And it's exciting to see. And so I wanted to say congratulations. I'm rooting and clapping for you. I wanted to just talk, a little bit. I was just reflecting. I was so excited to see you were joining this program, and you and I have had many conversations over the years. But I was thinking about one in particular this morning, and I think it happened right around the solar eclipse that happened maybe in 2017. It was in the midst of a really hard time. Charlottesville, the murder of Heather Heyer had happened around that moment. There was so much political violence by white nationalists and their alt-right coalition around the country. And you wrote this phenomenal song that you let me hear early. Thank you for that. I needed to hear that song, and it was called We Are One. And it was so powerful because it reminded me in the lines, you reminded us that most of us around the world were doing one thing together. And that if we could do one thing together, we might be able to do other things as well. But I was thinking also the imagery of kind of looking, right? And seeing with our eyes. And you've said some really wonderful, powerful things in music about the importance of seeing each other. Might I talk and push you a little bit to talk a little bit about what you said? I want folks to hear this.
In that song, and We Are One?
Yeah, in We Are One, you have us looking, but you've also just reflected a little bit about when we look into each other's eyes, right? Seeing each other. What do we see when we look at each other?
Right.
When we're looking at the same time?
Right. Don't you want to look into a stranger's eyes and see yourself looking back? Right. When I first moved to New York City, I found that amazing opportunity every day on the subway, to look at the humanity around me. And I would do this practice where I would imagine, especially the cantankerous folks who were clearly going through something, whether it was outward or inward, I would see them as a child or maybe even an infant, we have the propensity to love others, and the ability, and it's so easy and present for most of us to love a baby, a child. We see them and it's easy, there's hardly any reservation. You just feel love and almost adoration for another. And so, you know, that's a practice that I have used in the past when I'm facing someone who might be hard to love in the moment because of something that they might be spewing, or, you know, some hatred coming at me or another person, in order to
And it,
approach them, you know, from a place of kindness myself.
see, I love that, because it also reminds me of Bob Marley in a Wailers lyric. The biggest man you ever did see was once just a baby, right, in this life. And I think of your music, you know, I really want to sit up here and just talk about the importance of music. You know, music has always lifted me up, right? It has moved me forward. You and other artists, I promised I wouldn't start name dropping because I would inevitably leave out someone amazing. But, you know, artists have really sustained us in this moment. A lot of activists, a lot of organizers, a lot of community elected officials. I see them often quoting song lyrics more than I have ever seen before, which tells me music is kind of anchoring us, right? Tell me a little bit, how did you come to decide, right, that you wanted to tell your stories through music? And what does it mean to get up bravely in front of, if folks have never performed in front of people, if you've never gotten on stage, picked up an instrument, or just sang a cappella in front of people, I encourage you to do it. It is one of the most vulnerable things that one can do. And Anna, you do that. What does it mean to tell your story under that kind of vulnerability? Why is it so important?
Wow. Well, you know, when you said that we are anchoring ourselves, music anchors us and we kind of tether ourselves to that, that's so fascinating because it's ephemeral. It's the ether. It is absolutely not physical. You know, it is breath, like you say. And I mean, when I think of an anchor, I think of my guitar, because my guitar is the thing that makes me feel brave. It's this thing that I first feel is it's almost like my portal for my heart to reach others. I have this strength in the guitar because I first fell in love with that, and then I found my voice, and the storytelling, I guess it just comes naturally. I don't know. I'm so humbled to be speaking in this moment with you, receiving this prize. I mean,
And super nervous. I'm super nervous right now.
Don't worry, we've all felt nervous.
Okay.
I'm joining you now.
That's good, George.
Unfortunately, we're about to run out of time.
Oh,
I wanted Anna, and if this is okay, Eric, maybe just to say one or two words about the song that we're about to hear, and then I'm going to just say a few words to the audience about staying involved with the Civil Courage Prize, and then we're going to go to the video of your song, which will wrap up today's ceremony. And I just want to say again to Eric how just incredibly excited and thrilled all the members of the Train Foundation and those involved with the Civil Courage Prize are to have you with us today and to honor you and to listen to your very important, I would say inspiring and call to action remarks. So thank you.
Thank you. And Anna, we're about to hear the song Lie, Lie, Lie. Tell us quickly a little bit about it. It's very powerful.
Well, it's very autobiographical. I grew up in a poor kind of hippie family on welfare in the middle of very, very white farmer, North Dakota. And a lot of my understanding of the world came from the fact that we were different from people who didn't have light skin. And because of that, we were better by the way that I heard my dad put other people down. And, you know, in the recent years and through my life, as I realized, I learned as a teenager who Martin Luther King Jr. was, and I didn't know who he was because my parents were my teachers and they purposefully didn't tell me. These things that we all come to know as we open our hearts to others, so much of the world. We are all in our own little pods, and through our love, we find a way out of that. We find a way out of ourselves into the larger world of this inclusive democracy that we believe in and is still being born, like you say.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you for your music always. And thank you for keeping us lifted up. And congratulations again.
Congratulations.
Thank you both. Thank you again, Eric. We're going to hear your song now. I just want to say to the audience that we very much hope at the Civil Courage Prize that you'll stay engaged with us. We are always open to nominations. You can go to our website at www.civilcourageprize.com and .org, and it will be very easy for someone to nominate on that. And we are looking always for the widest range of nominees. We thank you for your engagement today, and we look forward to staying in touch with you. And with that, I look forward to hearing Anna's song right now. And thank you all for joining us. Good afternoon.
Not who I was, but how we were, living on the fringes, struggling and poor. But I was proud, 'cause I was taught that we were good and they were not. For we are lost inside ourselves, and through our love find a way out. It's hard to take, it's hard to say. The truth was made to lie that way. It gave her comfort, the drinking did, just like the smoking. That's what she said. She'd cover